Well, hi, everybody. I'm Don Stewart, and welcome to our second edition of Breaking News for this Thursday, the 15th day of May, 2025. And as usual, we have some really important stories that have come across the wire in the last few hours, stories that continue to set the stage for the events that the Bible predicts will take place on our planet at the time of the end of the age before the second coming of Jesus Christ, and the many events it also predicts that will precede it. We see the stage being set minutely every single day. And these stories are no exception. This first one is a great story. Witkoff told mediators the U.S. is not planning to force Israel to end the Gaza war, officials tell him. This is from the Times of Israel. Now, this is a great story because let me tell you, there have been so many stories that have leaked that said, well, Trump is going to force Netanyahu with this new ceasefire deal to stop the war. They have to quit it right now, declare a ceasefire, and that's it. And there's still a lot of work to be done. Now, they're getting there. And this next phase of the war, according to Israel, is going to be different than before. It's like they should have fought it from the beginning. And after that phase, then again, a ceasefire will seem to be in order, but they still have work to do. So this is good that there's not going to be pressure from the U.S. to stop right now if they can't come to an agreement. And it seems they can't come to an agreement with what we're hearing now out of Doha and Qatar. All right, now we move from Trump and Iran. They're both desperate. This is interesting. Trump and Iran are both desperate to cut a nuke deal as formula seems elusive. Well, I would hope it would. This is from YNET because they have two different goals in all this. Iran wants to keep enriching uranium. They don't want to give it up. And Trump's initially wanted to dismantle everything. There's going to be a however coming up in a minute. Next story from the Jerusalem Post, emerging nuclear agreement between the U.S. and Iran seems problematic. There's some issues here now happening, according to the Post, and we'll talk about that. And then another one from the Jerusalem Post, a story similar. The U.S. is not automatically adopting Israel's position that the enrichment facilities must be dismantled. And that's not good news at all. But this is supposedly what we're hearing now, that they're trying to find a compromise and do a deal without dismantling the enrichment facilities, without dismantling everything Iran has done and put together over the years. Iran, again, they're not going to do this. They're not going to dismantle. There's no way, shape, or form they would. The only way it's going to be dismantled is through bombs and attack. And so it's seemingly that's what it's going to take. But for some reason, and this is what is hard to understand, Trump seems convinced he has to do some deal. And we're going to talk about that. And again, the point is he does not, he should not. Finally, the IDF intercepts a Houthi missile that triggered sirens from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv. This is the fifth one this week that's come from Yemen, from the Houthis to Israel. This has got to stop. And part of the deal with Iran, if they do a deal, is that their surrogates have to stop this sort of thing. So again, we've got a lot of stuff going on. Let's look at the stories. First one, again, great news. Witkoff tells mediators the U.S. is not planning to force Israel to end the Gaza war, officials say, according to the Times of Israel. Arab sources tell the Times of Israel that Trump envoy currently working to coax Hamas to release a smaller number of hostages than what Israel has been demanding, hoping to meet the parties halfway. Since hostage talks between Israel and Hamas resumed in Doha on Wednesday, U.S. Special Envoy to the Mideast Steve Witkoff has told other mediators that Washington does not plan to force Israel to end the war in Gaza, amid Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's staunch refusal to do so. Two Arab officials told the Times of Israel on Thursday. Qatar and Egyptian mediators had hoped the U.S. would move in this direction, given comments from President Donald Trump and other top aides about their desire to end the war, following Hamas's Monday release of American Israeli hostage Idan Alexander. Netanyahu has insisted on only agreeing to a temporary ceasefire of roughly 45 days, which would begin with Hamas releasing about 10 hostages. During that time, he told Witkoff that Israel is prepared to hold talks on a permanent end to the war without committing to such a result up front, the first Arab official said. Now, Hamas has flatly rejected this framework, arguing that it has already agreed to release hostages during a January truce deal that was supposed to see Israel hold talks regarding a permanent end to the war. However, Netanyahu then refused to enter such negotiations and ended up resuming the IDF's offensive in Gaza on March 18th. Now, this all goes back to Biden. Biden forced Netanyahu basically to agree to that, but Netanyahu made it clear, look, in case it doesn't, we need to fight in case, there's not a peaceful resolution in the future. We're going to go back to fighting. That has to be understood. And this just seems to be a memo that Hamas didn't get. And it wasn't highly publicized, but they put it in the agreement because Biden didn't naturally didn't have it in at the beginning. And Netanyahu said, no, no, we can't sign something like this. We've got to be free, even after this first phase, not to commit to a shutdown of the war unless our goals are met. So this is why we've got the problem. And so as we go on, it says, accordingly, Hamas has insisted on an upfront Israeli commitment to end the war before it releases additional hostages. Therein lies the problem. It also issued a statement on Thursday warning of harm to the talks if Israel doesn't end its nearly 2.5-month-long blockade on aid entering in Gaza. Israel has accused Hamas of stealing much of the aid that was previously brought in. And it's interesting how they've got so many videos of exactly that happening. The trucks come in, these drones are filming Hamas's guys with on gunpoint, stealing all the supplies and selling it to the poor people of Gaza. All right, so due to both sides' intransigence, Witkoff has offered a proposal that tries to meet the sides halfway. One that would see the release of a smaller number of hostages in exchange for a weeks-long truce, the two Arab officials said. The Trump envoy has also tried to assure Hamas through mediators that the U.S. will make sure that this time Israel does enter talks regarding the terms of a permanent ceasefire. The Arab official said the sides remain far apart, but the American, Qatar, and Egyptian mediators were still looking to push them towards a compromise over the coming days. Now, here's the key. Israel has pledged to launch a major military operation to reoccupy and hold on to the entire strip if Hamas doesn't accept its proposal for a temporary ceasefire by the time Trump wraps up his Mideast trip on Friday. And that's tomorrow. Now, this is great news for the U.S. This is great news that the U.S. won't try to pressure Israel to stop the war. Like we said, there have been a number of stories to the contrary. And let's hope they're going to keep to that and let Israel do the job that it needs to do. It's their war. They're the ones that were attacked, and they need to finish it as, to their satisfaction so it doesn't happen again. So again, the first story is a good one. Now, the next three are rather problematic. Headline number 2, Trump and Iran both desperate to cut nuke deal as formula is still elusive. With current remarks resembling the 2015 JCPOA deal, Trump cannot allow the deal to close without achieving some other creative concessions. In other words, it's looking a lot like the 2015 deal Obama made right now. The Middle East has indeed radically changed. Suddenly, both U.S. President Donald Trump and Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei do not merely want to cut a nuclear deal and avoid a larger conflict. They're now both desperate for such a deal. This is key. Khamenei has decided to ignore those within the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps who oppose making major concessions to roll back his nuclear program to reach a nuclear deal after having let them dictate policy since 2019. So it sounds like he's putting his foot down, saying, no, no, it seems we have to make a deal. Likewise, Trump now is paying lip service to Israel and to the American officials who are hawkish about eliminating Tehran's nuclear capabilities. Nevertheless, in practical terms, he is ignoring the repeated advice, not only of Prime Minister Netanyahu, but also of Mossad Director David Barnea, IDF Intelligence Chief Major General Shlomi Bender, and some of the most critical details of a potential nuclear deal. In other words, you can't ignore these things. You have to deal with them. And again, here's the sad thing. It's essentially the same formula as the 2015 JCPOA nuclear deal, which Trump always called the worst deal ever. So Trump cannot allow the deal to close without achieving some other creative concessions. This is especially true since the same deal in 2025 would leave Iran only months away from nuclear weapons and not a year away because of its technological advances. Now, it's unfortunate that Trump is feeling the pressure to make such a deal. He's put the pressure on himself. There's voices on each side from his cabinet, from his, advisors. But for some reason, he's put all this pressure on himself to make a deal, to not get into some type of shooting war with Iran, which is the necessary thing to do. Sadly, in this time, it's really the only thing it can do to stop Iran from developing this nuclear weapon. And let's remember something, too, that seemingly is forgotten in all this. The nuclear weapons that Iran wants to develop are not just to destroy Israel, the little Satan. They're going to develop a weapon to destroy the United States. That's another plan they've had for years and years that they've said you got the big Satan and the little Satan. And that's why Iran has to be taken out of the picture. Their nuclear program has to be neutralized. Okay, headline number three, emerging nuclear agreement between the U.S. and Iran seems problematic, officials tell the Jerusalem Post. Why? Well, Trump is optimistic about a nuclear deal, but an Iranian official just called him a murderer. U.S. president says nuclear agreement is very close, but Tehran is making belligerent statements, and the commander of the Revolutionary Guard recall that Trump ordered the assassination of Qasem Soleimani in 2020 and is now conducting a wide-scale psychological operation against Iran. There is still, I think it's $50 million contract out on Trump, whoever murders him. And there's a number of different Iranian groups that are trying to fulfill that. Fortunately, they haven't been able to. But Tehran has not forgotten that. They previously vowed revenge against U.S. officials for the 2020 Baghdad airport strike that killed Soleimani. Soleimani, if you recall, was second in command, the Ayatollah in all of Iran, but he was really the guy that called the shots. He was brilliant putting the military together, just organizing everything for them. And his loss he could not be replaced. It has not been replaced. They've had people try and do what he did, but he was kind of a one of a kind thing. So it was a huge, huge, huge loss in 2020, the beginning of 2020. And, even a harsher loss than if they would have lost the Ayatollah there. So anyway, they're trying to get revenge. And as the article says, over the years, multiple plots allegedly orchestrated by Iran against Trump and other foreign officials, such as ex-National Security Advisor John Bolton, have been reported. Also, there's other ones that they've been going after there, too. One such attempt was reportedly foiled just before last year's U.S. elections. Iran officially denies involvement in these plots. Well, we know for a fact they're still involved in these plots. They've still got the bounty out on Trump. And Mike Pompeo has also got a bounty out on him. And it's one of these things that they have not forgotten. They have a long memory on something like this. All right. So in an afternoon speech, Salami, remember that's one of the head generals there. We call him Baloney, but his name is actually Salami. He boasted about Iran's capabilities, saying the country whose battered economy is a key driver for its return to talks, and it's stronger than ever. Iran stands today stronger than ever, and the U.S. must acknowledge its reality. In recent weeks, we achieved a significant breakthrough in the defense technology that will soon be revealed, he said. It's absolute nonsense. They are hurt and they're screaming, they're in pain. They desperately need an agreement. Why? Because of the sanctions bleeding them dry. They need their money released because they're hurting. And again, that recent accident that took place there in the on the coast when all their facilities there, their number one place where they have facilities for all the containers. They're in one place where they would receive things and ship them from China and from back and forth. It was destroyed. Something, what was over $5 billion, $3 billion worth of damage to that. The Houthis had $5 billion damage to their airports. So a lot of damage was done by these accidents and both that have taken place in Iran. There's a whole bunch of other accidents that have taken place. And as we've informed you, look forward to some more accidents taking place in the near future. And we will leave it at that. Now, here is a problematic story, and this is one that we hope will. This got a lot of comments from the Jerusalem Post, a lot of negative ones, a lot of "I told you so's." Hopefully, it's not going to come to fruition. The U.S. is not automatically adopting Israel's position that enrichment facilities must be dismantled. The emerging agreement between Iran and the U.S. seems problematic for Israel, Israeli officials told the Jerusalem Post today, Thursday. Israel's official position, as we've said it before and many times, is Netanyahu's position that the U.S. insist on the Libyan model, which happened in the early 2000s, meaning, as was the case with Libya about 20 years ago, they completely dismantled their uranium enrichment facilities, completely. Now, two Western officials told the Post that progress has recently been made in the talks between the U.S. and Iran. They added that several options related to enrichment facilities and the broader issue of uranium enrichment are currently being considered. This effectively means that U.S. is not automatically adopting Israel's position that the enrichment facilities must be dismantled, and of course, gaps still remain. In conclusion, the officials noted that gaps do remain, and as a result, the talks may not ultimately lead to an agreement. And that's what we hope and pray. There will be no agreement. Israel and the U.S. have to take military action to neutralize this program there which they are not going to stop on their own. They're not going to agree to stop it. Like we said earlier in the first edition of Breaking News today, they will sign all the agreements in the world that they're going to stop it. They're liars. They're not going to stop it. They're going to keep enriching uranium. They're going to keep working on their, missiles, the ability to, launch the missiles and the such like. And so this is why it's got to stop. And finally, the IDF Intercepts Houthi missile that triggered sirens from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv. It's the fifth time this Yemen-based terror group has fired a missile at Israel in the past week. This obviously has to stop. And that's why something has to happen to stop all of this with Iran, with the Houthis. And as usual, we'll continue to wait and see how all this turns out in the short run. We know what's going to happen in the long run, but in the short run, we just wait to see. All right, I'm Don Stewart. We'll see you again tomorrow morning for another edition of Breaking News. Until then, as always, may the Lord richly, richly bless.